An Alabama Cooperative Extension System production.
Good morning, and welcome to the Alabama Cooperative Extension System Master Gardener Program on Plant Physiology. I'm Mary Beth Musgrove, Extension Associate in the Horticultural Department at Auburn University and State Master Gardener Program Coordinator with the Alabama Cooperative Extension System. It's a pleasure to have you with us on this, our first Master Gardener training class taught by satellite. We're very excited about being able to deliver this broadcast to the 67 county extension sites in the state, and particularly to those folks who are taking the Master Gardener training course in these counties. It's good to have you join us. For those viewers from other states and those who might not be familiar with the Master Gardener program, Master Gardener is an educational program provided by county extension offices of the Alabama Cooperative Extension System. This program consists of at least 40 hours of intensive horticultural training. Close to 3,000 Alabamians have become certified Master Gardeners, volunteering their expertise and service in support of the cooperative extension effort related to the horticultural sciences. Joining me in the studio today is our instructor, Dr. Mary Miller. Dr. Miller is an assistant professor of agronomy and soils at Auburn University. Dr. Miller teaches crop sciences at Auburn, including ecological physiology, which is one of the reasons why she became interested in working with us on the plant physiology class of the Master Gardener program. I happen to know that Dr. Miller is also an avid gardener and loves getting her hands in the dirt. Welcome, Dr. Miller. It's a pleasure to have you join us today.
Thank you, Mary Beth.
The training you will receive today on plant physiology is absolutely essential to understanding how plants grow and develop. This information will not only give you a better understanding of other classes you will have in the Master Gardener course, but it will also help you answer the horticultural questions you will have as a Master Gardener volunteer. We will have 3 question and answer segments throughout the broadcast today where Dr. Miller and I will answer your questions. For those who are participating in Master Gardener classes around the state, your county extension agent or facilitator should have provided you with a packet of information to be used today. You should have a plant physiology handout, which will follow along with Dr. Miller's lecture. We encourage you to make notes of any questions you have in the margin of your handout and telephone or fax in these questions during the question and answer segments. Those numbers are 1-800-258-2237 to call in your question. To fax us, call 1-334-844-9372. Your site facilitator should have also given you these numbers to call or fax in your questions to us.
The physiology handout has several key objectives in each section that will be covered. And this will give you a preview of the information we will cover. These objectives will also help you prepare for the quiz, which will be given next week by your site facilitator. You will also find several graphics in your handout that are different than those that we will show. These graphics will be helpful as a reference.
Finally, we would like to make sure that you complete the satellite evaluation form at the end of today's class. You should have this form in your packet of information as well. It's very important that you turn in this evaluation to your site facilitator at the end of the class. This information will help us plan for future Master Gardener distance education classes. Thank you for your help. Well, without any further delay, let's listen to Dr. Miller talk to us about plant physiology.
An understanding of the way a plant grows, functions, and responds to its environment is essential to the expert management of that plant. This presentation is organized into 2 major units: plant growth and development and environmental factors that affect plant growth. In Unit 1, Plant Growth and Development, we will consider the basic structures and processes we need to recognize to understand how plant growth occurs. Upon completion of this section, you should be able to define plant growth, list the basic requirements for plant growth, list the environmental factors that affect plant growth, discuss the difference between a plant organ and a plant tissue, and list 4 types of plant tissues and the role of each tissue in plant growth. Plant growth is a progressive and irreversible change in form that involves the formation of new cells, their enlargement, and maturation. Requirements for plant growth include light, heat or temperature, energy, water, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and mineral elements. Besides heredity or genetics, the important environmental factors that affect plant growth include relative humidity, time of year, temperature, radiant energy, photoperiod, soil water, the atmosphere, and the availability of mineral elements. We will consider several of these factors in more detail in Unit 2, Environmental Factors that Affect Plant Growth. Plants are often split into 3 basic organs or parts that are easily identified: leaves, stems, and roots. Each of these parts look different. That is to say, they each have a different structure, and they also have different functions in the physiology of the plant. However, we will see that all of these parts are connected internally by similar plant tissues. A tissue is a group of plant cells that form a structure with a particular role in the plant. There are several types of tissues found in a plant. Meristematic tissues are tissues that are actively growing. The important process of cell division occurs in meristematic tissues. Protective tissue such as the epidermis or skin of the plant, which provides covering and protection for internal leaf tissues. Fundamental tissues provide food storage and structural strength. And vascular or conductive tissue that transports water and nutrients. Plant leaves, stems, and roots are all made up of these 4 basic tissue types. In turn, the basic unit of plant tissue structure is the plant cell. Now let's consider plant structure in more detail by examining plant cells, tissues, and organs. Upon completion of this section, you should be able to list the 4 basic parts of plant cells and the role of each part in cell function, list 6 basic cell functions, list 2 types of roots and give an example of each, define and discuss the function of the root tip, root cap, meristematic region, region of elongation, region of differentiation, cortex, stele, xylem, phloem, and epidermis. List 4 functions of roots. List 7 factors that influence root growth and development. List 3 types of stems and give an example of a plant with each stem type. Define node and internode. List 4 functions of stems. Discuss the role of light intensity and nutrient supply in stem growth. Define leaf blade, leaf epidermis, guard cell, and stomata. Discuss the role of the palisade and spongy parenchyma in leaves. And list 3 functions of leaves. Plant cells are the basic structural and functional unit of the plant. Each cell contains genetic material in the nucleus. The cytoplasm is the matrix in which biochemical reactions occur in the cell. Vacuoles are water-filled spaces in cells. Vacuoles help keep the cell turgid or expanded. The cell wall helps in structural support of the plant. Cells have many important functions in the plant: absorption and secretion, transformation of light energy into chemical energy, respiration and release of energy, digestion and transformation of food, synthesis of complex chemicals, and synthesis of protoplasm. We will now consider how plant cells work together in tissues to provide growth and development in plant organs. Root systems are as important as plant organs found above ground, but have often been ignored because they aren't usually seen. There are two basic types of root systems: fibrous, such as those found in azaleas and grasses, and taproot, such as those found in carrots and trees. Roots have definable tissue regions which carry on specific functions. The root tip is comprised of the root cap, which offers protection for the growing root tip. The meristematic region, which is the active area of cell division. The region of elongation, which is the area of cell enlargement. And the region of differentiation, where root hairs develop. The root hair is an extension of a root epidermal cell. Root hairs are important because they greatly increase the surface area available for absorption of soil, water, and nutrients. If a root cross-section is examined under a microscope, several tissues can be seen very clearly. The cortex is the food storage area of the root. This is a fundamental tissue. The stele contains the conducting or vascular tissue, the veins of the root. Xylem and phloem tissues are located in the stele. Xylem is the tissue that conducts water and nutrients from the soil. Phloem translocates or moves sugars from the leaves to sites in the plant where they are used for tissue growth and maintenance. The epidermis, or outer skin of a plant root, is the protective tissue found on the surface. Roots have several important functions in a plant: anchorage and support, absorption and translocation of water and nutrients, food storage, and plant propagation. Hosta is a good example of a plant that is propagated by root division. While genetics influence root growth and development to a large degree by determining the type of root system a plant has, fibrous versus tap, and its movement in response to gravity, environmental factors also influence root growth and development. These images show how root growth responds to variations in soil moisture, physical condition of the soil, particularly compaction, soil fertility, soil pH, particularly acidity, soil temperature, and soil aeration, or amount of oxygen available. The plant stem is often referred to as the shoot, but usually the term shoot refers to the leaves plus the stem of a particular plant. Stems can be of several types. Woody stems live from year to year, such as with shrubs like Elaeagnus. Herbaceous stems generally live for one season, such as with tomatoes, petunias, and many other bedding plants. Some stems are modified from the general forms seen in woody and herbaceous plants. Rhizomes are modified stems that grow beneath the soil surface, such as in iris and the ornamental grasses. Stolons are modified stems that grow above or right on the soil surface, such as the structures found in strawberries and Bermuda grass. Tubers are modified stems that store large amounts of food and are used for vegetative propagation, such as is found in bulbs and potatoes. No matter what type of stem a plant has, all stems have structural similarities. Nodes are the point of leaf attachment, and internodes are the areas between the nodes. Let's summarize several important functions stems have in plant growth and development. Support and display of the leaves, flowers, and fruit, transport of water, nutrients, and sugars in the vascular tissue, the xylem and the phloem, storage of plant food, and plant propagation. Certain environmental factors that affect stem growth may be modified by cultural practices. Proper light intensity is important in healthy stem development because shading of the stem can cause excessive elongation of the internodes. The result will be weak stems that cannot adequately support the leaves, flowers, and fruits. Similarly, excessive fertilization, particularly with nitrogen, can cause excessive growth and stem shading that leads to weak, leggy plants with spindly stems. Plant leaves are the major food-producing organs on the plant. Each leaf is attached to the stem at a node. All leaves contain a blade, which is the expanded area of the leaf, specialized for photosynthesis. The leaf surface, or skin of the leaf, is called the epidermis. The epidermis is coated with a protective, waxy cuticle that reduces water loss and attacks by plant pests. The guard cells are another feature of the epidermis. The guard cells form the stomata, which are pores in the leaf epidermis controlled by the guard cells. We will see later how these guard cells allow the plant to breathe. Two distinctive features of the internal structure of the leaf are the palisade and the spongy parenchyma tissues. These tissues are very important because they contain chloroplasts and chlorophyll, which are both necessary for photosynthesis. Leaves are linked to all other organs in the plant through the vascular tissues, or veins, made up of the xylem and the phloem. Let's summarize the important functions leaves have in plant growth and development. Photosynthesis occurs in the leaf cells that contain chloroplasts and chlorophyll. Translocation occurs through the vascular or conducting tissue. Exchange of gases occurs via the stomates. Transpiration refers to water vapor loss from leaves and also occurs mainly via the stomates.
In 10 minutes, Dr. Miller will discuss plant physiological processes. But now we'd like to open up the fax and phone lines for your questions. To call in your questions, dial 1-800-258-2237. That's 1-800-258-2237. To fax us your questions, please call 1-334-844-9372. While we wait for your questions, let's review some of the important terms presented in the first section. Welcome back. Again, we'd like to remind you during the break that we would like for you to call in your questions at 1-800-258-2237, or you may fax in your questions at 1-334-844-9372. During the break, we had two very interesting questions come in by fax from Calhoun County, and we'll answer those for you now.
The first question is, do plants slough off cells and replace like humans do? That's a really good question. The answer is, in certain parts of the plant, remember we talked about the plant root, and the root cap, which is the protective area that protects the meristematic region right behind it, actually does slough cells as it moves through the soil, and they are replaced by that meristematic region. Otherwise, there's not much cell sloughing that goes on in plant cells the way it does in humans. The other question was, why is using soap and insecticidal soap, why it does not destroy the leaf structure, particularly the waxy epidermal layer. If you'll remember, when we talked about the epidermal layer, which is this covering of the leaf right here, the covering of the leaf, we said it had a waxy coating on it. And insecticidal soap is not a solvent of wax the way that some other compounds such as alcohols or other organic solvents would be. What these do, though, and if you're familiar with surfactants or soaps that are added to other pesticides, it helps to break the surface tension and allows those to spread over the surface of that layer. But they don't destroy it because it would take another sort of solvent to actually dissolve that organic layer of wax that coats the epidermis of the leaf. Very good questions.
Very good. Thank you for calling those in, Calhoun County. We also have a question now from someone in our studio class here, Jim Warman. Jim, go ahead with your question now.
I have a question, Dr. Miller, about comment you made about phloem translocating sugars, and then as in a positive used the word move. Does translocate suggest something about the process of the movement, or does it mean something different than the word move?
It includes that. That's a real good question. It includes that, but it includes the concept of movement from the site of production or the source of the material to the area that it's being used. So we talk about sugars being translocated from the leaves where they're produced to other parts of the plant where they're used for growth and maintenance of the plant. That's a good question.
Well, thank you for all your questions. Let's listen now as Dr. Miller continues with a discussion of plant physiological functions.
As we have seen, the structures we have located are all important in the major physiological functions of the plant: transpiration, photosynthesis, and respiration. In the next section, we will take a closer look at these basic plant physiological functions that occur during plant growth and development. Upon completion of this section, you should be able to define transpiration and discuss its importance in plants, list 3 factors that affect stomatal opening and give an example of how each factor affects transpiration, list 5 environmental factors that affect the rate of transpiration and give an example of how each factor affects transpiration, define photosynthesis and respiration and discuss their function and importance to plants and people. List the beginning and end products of photosynthesis and respiration and discuss the logistics of each process. List 5 factors that affect photosynthesis and discuss the effect of each factor on the rate of photosynthesis. And list 4 factors that affect the rate of respiration and discuss the effect each factor has on respiration rate. Transpiration refers to the loss of water vapor from stomates. To review, stomates are pores in the leaf epidermis formed by the guard cells. A large amount of water is lost as vapor through the stomates in the process of transpiration. In general, What percentage of the water taken up by the plant from the soil would you estimate is lost through transpiration? The answer is D, 95%. For example, an actively growing squash plant can transpire about 10 times its fresh weight daily. This turnover is equivalent to a squash plant's complete water content every hour during the day. Transpiration is caused by a water vapor concentration gradient. In other words, the difference in the amount of water vapor inside and outside the leaf. Inside the leaf, water vapor present causes the humidity to be 100%. Usually the humidity in the air outside the leaf is somewhat less than 100%. Since water vapor and other gases tend to move from areas where their concentration is higher, in this case inside the leaf, to areas where their concentration is lower, such as in the air outside the leaf, water vapor is lost from the leaf to the air. Transpiration is a passive process since no energy is used by the plant during the process. In fact, stomata actually developed on the leaf surface to facilitate entry of carbon dioxide into the leaf. The loss of water vapor is a process that occurs mainly because the stomates or pores in the leaf surface open up to allow carbon dioxide to enter the leaf. To better understand the process of water loss from plants, let's consider the mechanisms involved in stomatal opening and closing. Stomata can be less than fully open, and this regulates water loss. Stomata are opened and closed by the guard cells, which form them, and the turgidity of the guard cells controls the stomatal opening. When a cell is fully turgid, the cell is holding as much water as it can. Increasing the turgidity of the guard cells causes the stomates to open, and decreasing the turgidity of the guard cells causes them to close. Changes in the turgidity of the guard cells are regulated by changes in the uptake of potassium ions into those cells. Environmental factors play a major role in regulation of stomatal opening and closing. Light level influences the rate of stomatal opening and final size of the pore formed. Light causes a buildup of potassium ions in the guard cells, and thus turgidity is increased. Plant water status also affects turgidity of the guard cells. Stomata close if the plant experiences a water deficit. Temperature extremes can also cause the stomates to close. Environmental factors can also have direct and indirect effects on transpiration. Changes in relative humidity of the air have a direct effect on the water vapor concentration gradient. Temperature can indirectly affect transpiration rate by affecting relative humidity levels in the air. Wind destroys the leaf boundary layer, or area of higher concentration of water vapor near the leaf surface, and thus steepens the water vapor concentration gradient from inside the leaf to the air. Soil water supply directly affects plant water status and thus affects stomatal opening and closing. Soil fertility indirectly affects plant water status because well-fertilized plants use water more efficiently than nutrient-deficient plants. In addition to irrigation, other cultural practices can also help to maintain proper plant water status. Newly planted plants continue to transpire, but their roots have not grown into the surrounding soil. Mulching helps reduce soil temperature and decrease water loss from soil during establishment of new roots. Mulching assures that more soil water will remain available to the planting as it becomes established. Application of a slow-release fertilizer to landscape plantings will help assure a more even supply of nutrients as roots develop, thereby increasing the efficiency with which the planting uses available water. The second plant physiological function we will consider is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the food manufacturing process in plants. In this process, plants convert radiant or light energy to chemical energy. Some of this chemical energy is then used by the plant to incorporate more carbon into plant tissue for growth and for all other metabolic processes that accompany growth and maintenance of plant tissues. Photosynthesis occurs in plant cells with small bodies or organelles called chloroplasts. In fact, chloroplasts are the precise sites in the cell where light energy is converted to chemical energy. Although the reactions of photosynthesis are usually shown like this, the process is really a series of reactions linked together into what is known as a pathway. In addition to light and chlorophyll, what raw materials are needed for photosynthesis to occur? And what is the fate of the products produced? The overall summary reaction of photosynthesis shows that carbon dioxide and water are the materials needed for the process of photosynthesis to produce sugars, oxygen, and water. The logistics of the process are: carbon dioxide used in photosynthesis comes from the air surrounding the plant. Water used in photosynthesis comes from the soil. The sugars or food produced in photosynthesis is used by the plant for growth, which occurs through biochemical synthesis and maintenance. Oxygen produced in photosynthesis goes to the air or is used by the plant. Water produced in photosynthesis goes to the air through transpiration or is used by the plant in further metabolic reactions. There are at least 5 important factors that directly or indirectly affect the process of photosynthesis. If any one of these factors are limiting, photosynthetic rates will decline. The first factor is carbon dioxide concentration of the air available to the plant. As the carbon dioxide concentration in the air decreases, photosynthesis decreases. Plant water status affects the rate of photosynthesis indirectly by affecting the stomates. As stated previously, as the plant experiences a water deficit, the stomates close. Carbon dioxide cannot enter the leaf, and photosynthetic rate declines. Light affects the rate of photosynthesis directly, since it is needed for chemical energy to be produced, and indirectly by affecting the stomatal opening. Temperature directly affects photosynthesis within the range of growth for a particular plant, because the rate of chemical reactions increases as temperature increases. Chlorophyll content of leaves decreases as leaves age. Therefore, older leaves have lower photosynthetic rates than the younger leaves on a particular plant. Respiration is the last plant physiological process we will consider. Respiration refers to the release of the chemical energy fixed by the plant in photosynthesis for use in growth, development, and maintenance of the plant tissues. Unlike photosynthesis, which occurs only in cells that contain chloroplasts, respiration occurs in all plant cells. Like photosynthesis, respiration is actually a series of reactions or pathway. If we examine the summary reaction for respiration, which shows the materials needed and the products, it is almost the reverse of photosynthesis. In respiration, sugars are combined with oxygen to break the sugars down into carbon dioxide, which goes back to the air. Energy, which is used for plant growth, development, and maintenance, water, which is used by the plant or transpired, and heat, or lost energy. At least 4 factors affect the rate at which respiration proceeds. Respiration is highest in meristematic tissues and developing seeds. Therefore, tissue type is a major factor that determines respiration rate. Within the limits of growth for a particular plant, increases in temperature increase respiration rate. Oxygen is needed for the most efficient release of chemical energy in respiration, so oxygen supply affects respiration rate. Glucose supply is important since glucose or sugar is the molecule from which energy is released to be used for plant growth and maintenance. For review, Let's compare some important points about the processes of photosynthesis and respiration. Photosynthesis occurs only in plant cells that contain chloroplasts. Respiration occurs in every active living cell. Photosynthesis takes place only in the presence of light. Respiration takes place at all times during the life of the cell, both in the light and in the dark. Photosynthesis uses water and carbon dioxide. Respiration uses the products of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis releases water and oxygen. Respiration releases water and carbon dioxide. In photosynthesis, solar energy is converted into chemical energy, which may then be used for manufacturing carbohydrates or proteins. In respiration, energy is released by breakdown of carbohydrates and proteins. Photosynthesis results in an increase in plant weight. Respiration results in a decrease in plant weight. In photosynthesis, food is built up. In respiration, food is broken down.
Welcome back. Please call in your questions at 1-800-258-2237. Until we get a few questions, we will continue with a review of some important terminology in about 5 minutes. But if you need to take a break, we're going to give you about 5 minutes now, and we'll come back and join you at that time. Welcome back. We've certainly had a great number of questions come in, and we appreciate your response. One of the first questions that we got came in from Etowah County, and Dr. Miller is going to share this question with you and discuss the answer now.
The question involves information that we covered on page 3, the requirements for plant growth and the factors affecting plant growth. In that portion, I mentioned these so that you could have a preview of all of the different factors that we would talk about as the program went on. But what I did was went back and listed these requirements and factors on the board so that you can jot them down and have a summary of them on page 3 in item 2, requirements for plant growth and factors affecting plant growth. Under requirements for plant growth, we listed light, heat or temperature, energy, water, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and mineral elements. Okay, so we have light, heat or temperature, energy, water, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and then mineral elements. We kind of rearranged it a little bit for the factors that affect plant growth. We talked about relative humidity, the atmosphere, which includes the relative humidity, time of year, very important, temperature, radiant energy, photoperiod, soil, water, and mineral elements. These are the factors that affect plant growth, particularly those in the environment.
Very good. We also had another question that came in from Jackson County, one of our master gardeners, Mr. Graves, in the Jackson County class. The question is, considering the importance of oxygen in the soil, how do you compensate for no-till, heavy thatch, and ground cover materials that reduce oxygen getting to the roots?
As roots grow through the soil, they form pores in the soil. They also release substances that improve the structure of the soil. And as you'll learn, or if you have learned in your soil portion of the Master Gardener class, that soil structure and the enhancement of soil structure is very important to keep pores in the soil that water and oxygen can move into. So having a healthy root system will help enhance the structure of the soil, and this certainly is the case under these situations. So oxygen would also be allowed to enter the soil.
Good. Another question that we received from one of the county extension agents in Elmore County, one of our Tri-County Master Gardener programs going on there. Rick asked us, why do some plants weep? For example, pothos, that's a common occurrence in some plants. Dr. Miller, could you answer that for him?
That's a good question. There was also a question that came from another county. I'm not sure exactly which one it was, but they also asked why leaves sweat, and I believe that they're referring to the same phenomenon. In some species, there is a phenomenon that occurs where root pressures develop, and water is forced up from the roots under considerable pressure. When the conditions for transpiration are very low, remember we talked about when you have a high humidity and you have a very good plant water status, transpiration rates are low, you get a phenomenon called guttation. And that is why it happens, is because some species can actually force water up when they're under a very desirable water status, and the plant is in an atmosphere that has a very high humidity.
I can think of a number of interior or house plants that do that. That's a good question. You want to go ahead and continue on with those questions that we received? I believe those are from Coosa County, but
We had a couple initially from Jefferson County right at the end of the last section, and I'll address these first. The question is, why under cell functions is reproduction not listed as a cell function? This is a good question. Reproduction is a cell function, but it's a function of sexual reproduction is a function of very few cells in the plant. Vegetative reproduction can occur by other cells, but this will be covered more in the plant propagation portion of the course. But it is a function, but sexual reproduction only occurs in very few cells in the plants, and those related to the flowers or the flowering portion. Another question from Jefferson County was, is it true that temperature increases the rate of photosynthesis and respiration, and if so, why? And this is another good question. It does within the range of growth for that plant up to a certain point. And the reason is how we pointed out that respiration and photosynthesis are a series of reactions, biochemical reactions that occur in the plant. And chemical reactions increase, the rate of chemical reactions increase as temperature increases. And this is why up to the portion of the temperature range that a plant is adapted to, you will get increases in temperature and respiration, photosynthesis and respiration. And then another question from Coosa County was, when a beam of light hits a chloroplast, what is the process that changes it into something a plant can use? And this is a good question that relates to the exact process that happens that changes the radiant energy into chemical energy. We didn't get into photosynthesis in that much detail, but photosynthesis, like we said, is a series of reactions or a pathway. And the first reaction that occurs, the first set of reactions that occurred are called the light reactions, because light is necessary for these reactions to occur. And so if I want to answer this pretty simply, we'll say the light reactions. There's another set of reactions in photosynthesis called the dark reactions. And they don't need light to occur, but they are also included in this process. So it's the light reactions that allow radiant energy from the sun to be transformed into chemical energy for the plant to use.
Very good. All these are excellent questions. We want you to continue to call in your questions at 1-800-258-2237, or again, you may fax them in at 1-334-844-9372. We did have another question that came in from the Tri-County class in Montgomery area. The question was, do all plants contain chlorophyll?
That's a really good question. You would think that all plants would, but in fact, there are some plants that live on land that are land plants that do not contain chlorophyll. And the reason is they are parasitic on other plants, and they obtain their carbohydrates from the plant that they parasitize. Some good examples of this, one that you may not be familiar with, you're probably familiar with the mistletoe that we have on trees, on hardwood trees. That's not as damaging because it is green and it does photosynthesize. But there's another mistletoe that lives on coniferous species in the west that parasitizes the trees and kills them. And so it's a lot more damaging than the mistletoe we have here in the east. Another example you may be familiar with is dodder, sometimes called love vine. And it's a parasite of plants. You'll see it along fence rows. It's yellow in color. It is a plant, but it doesn't have chlorophyll. It gets its energy from the plant that it parasitizes, and in that way weakens that plant.
Very good. Another question that they also asked, Dr. Miller, is if you know, are there any computer programs that might be available on the subject of plant physiology?
I'm not sure about computer programs that would be available to the general public, but I use one in my crop science classes called Plant Mod, which allows you to model the physiology of plant communities. It's very nice for that. It's available through Green Hat Software in Australia, and they've just recently developed a brand new computer software related to this called WaterMod, and it allows you to model the water relationships of plants. But I'm not familiar with any that are available to the general public. These are more used for courses like the ones that I teach here at Auburn. We had some other questions, a few other questions that I'll go through now. I'm not sure, are these from here in Lee County also?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. What role do nutrients play in stomatal openings? As you may remember, we talked about stomates opening, guard cells opening in response to the buildup of potassium ions in the that is caused by light, and they open in response to that because the turgidity of the cells increases as the potassium ions build up. We get more water coming in to balance the potassium ions that enter into the guard cells. So potassium plays an important role as a plant nutrient in stomatal opening. Another very good question is the second question we got in this series. It's one that we'll address a little bit in more detail in the next unit on the environmental effects on plant growth. And that question is, what is the ratio of CO2 produced versus CO2 consumed by plants? In other words, how much carbohydrate is produced and how much carbohydrate is consumed by plants? And the question is, it depends. It depends because carbohydrate is produced during respiration. Photosynthesis is carbon dioxide is consumed during photosynthesis. So if the plant is not photosynthesizing, there is more carbon dioxide being produced than consumed. And we'll see that this is very, very important in the healthy growth and development of plants, what this ratio is. But it depends upon those two processes and the balance of those that are taking place at any one time in the plant. Another interesting question was, can you see stomates with the naked eye? It's very difficult to. You can see them with a hand lens, but you need some magnification to see them very readily. Another question that I can't answer, maybe Mary Beth can, is how can you harvest chlorophyll from green plants for use as a health aid? I know how you can extract it and use some organic solvents to extract it, but I don't know that it would be very usable as a health aid after they're exposed to that. I'm not sure how that process works. We could check into that.
Yeah, that might be something we'd have to check into. I'm not sure about that. I know there are a lot of herbs and medicinal plants now being used for nutritional aspects, but do we have a question from the studio audience here? Anyone like to ask a question? This is your opportunity. Come on up to the mic.
During one of the breaks, we were having a discussion back there and wanted to know if you would clear up the difference between an Irish potato and a sweet potato, whether they were tubers, rhizomes, modified stems, or exactly what. And there was a great debate back here. We wonder if you could answer that for us.
Good.
That's a good question. As we noted when we talked about modified stems, Irish potato is a tuber. It's a modified stem. And the sweet potato is a root, modified root. So they are different in their what they're modified from in their structure. But the thing that's similar is that both of them can be used for vegetative propagation of that species.
All right. Well, thank you for your questions. We understand that physiology is a difficult question and or subject, and we have had a lot of questions, and we hope that you were able to follow along with the questions. In the final segment of the video conference, we'll discuss important environmental factors and phenomena that affect plant growth.
Plant growth and distribution are limited by the environment. In Unit 1, we saw many examples of environmental factors such as light, water, and air that affect plant physiological processes. If any one environmental factor is less than ideal, it will become a limiting factor in plant growth. Limiting factors are also responsible for the geography of plant distribution. For example, only plants adapted to limited amounts of water can live in deserts. Most plant problems are caused by environmental stress, either directly or indirectly. Therefore, it is important to understand the environmental aspects that affect plant growth. These factors are soil nutrients, water and humidity, light, and temperature. In Unit 2, we will consider these factors further, beginning with plant nutrients. Upon completion of this section, you should be able to list the 12 essential plant mineral nutrients and the class of each, list 2 functions of the essential mineral nutrients in plants, and define root interception, mass flow, and diffusion as mechanisms of nutrient transfer to plant roots. There are 12 essential mineral nutrients needed by plants for healthy growth and development. These nutrients are usually divided into 3 major classes based upon the relative amounts of the nutrient needed for plant growth. The major nutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The secondary nutrients are calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. The micronutrients are iron, manganese, boron, copper, zinc, and molybdenum. This chart shows the relationship between soil pH, or soil acidity or alkalinity, and availability of the essential plant nutrients. This topic and others related to soil fertility will be discussed in more depth in the Soils and Plant Nutrition portion of the Master Gardener course. Essential nutrients function in basically 2 ways in plants. Major and secondary nutrients generally function as constituents of plant molecules, such as proteins, hormones, and chlorophyll. Many of the micronutrients function as activators of metabolic reactions. 3 mechanisms bring nutrient ions into contact with roots. Roots grow and run into or intercept nutrients in their path in a mechanism called interception. In mass flow, there is a transfer of nutrients to the root surface in the soil water. Nutrients are also brought into contact with plant roots through diffusion, the process where a concentration gradient is set up. In other words, as roots take up nutrients, soil water solution closest in contact with the root develops a reduced concentration of nutrients, while soil water further away from the root has a higher concentration of nutrients. Root absorption of essential nutrients can be an active or passive process. Well-aerated or aerobic conditions are needed for nutrient uptake in most plants. An example of a common problem related to nutrient deficiency caused by soil water status is blossom end rot. Blossom end rot is caused by either drought or excessive water interfering with calcium uptake. As we have seen, both soil water and humidity of the air affect plant growth. Upon completion of this section, you should be able to list 5 functions of water in the plant and discuss the path of water through the plant. Water has many important functions in the physiology of a plant. As we have seen, water plays a critical role in all physiological processes. For example, water is a primary component in the reactions of photosynthesis and respiration. Water is responsible for maintaining turgor pressure of tissue. For example, stomata opening and closing, tissue wilting, and root movement through the soil are affected in large part by the water status of the plant. Water is the solvent that allows transport of mineral nutrients and other molecules throughout the plant in the conducting tissue. Water helps to stabilize plant temperature by gradual evaporation from the surface of the leaf near the stomates. When transpiration was discussed, the relationship between humidity in the air and transpiration rate was explained. Let's review this concept again. Transpiration is caused by a water vapor concentration gradient. In other words, the difference in the amount of water vapor inside and outside the leaf. Inside the leaf, the water vapor causes the humidity to be 100%. Usually the humidity in the air outside the leaf is somewhat less than 100%. Since water vapor and other gases tend to move from areas where their concentration is higher, in this case inside the leaf, to areas where their concentration is lower, such as in the air outside the leaf, water vapor is lost from the leaf to the air. Examining the path of water through the plant will allow us to relate the environmental effects we have discussed in this section to the physiological processes previously discussed. Water enters the plant through the root hairs, which are extensions of the root epidermal cells. From the root hair cells, water then diffuses through the root cells to the xylem tissue. Water then moves from the root xylem to the stem xylem to the leaf xylem, and finally to the mesophyll cells. Water is used in the mesophyll for photosynthesis and respiration, or moves out of the leaves as water vapor through stomates in the process of transpiration. We have seen that light is an important factor in photosynthesis. However, there are other important plant processes that respond to light. Upon completion of this section, you should be able to list the 3 major plant responses to light, define the 3 components of light requirement, and discuss the importance of each in plant growth and development, and define short day, long day, and day neutral plants. The 3 major plant responses to light are photosynthesis, which is the source of chemical energy for plant growth and development, photoperiodism, which is the response of floral initiation or the development of flowers to light quantity, and phototropism, or plant movement toward light. This plant is showing what is called a phototropic response, since it is bending toward the light. The combination of light characteristics required by a particular plant is known as the light requirement for that plant. Light requirement has 3 characteristics: quantity, quality, and duration. Light quantity refers to the intensity or concentration of sunlight and varies with the season of the year. As light intensity decreases within a range for a particular plant, photosynthesis decreases. Light intensity can be decreased in the garden or greenhouse through the use of cloth shades. Reflective material and supplemental lights can be used in the greenhouse to increase light intensity. Light quality refers to the color or wavelength of light reaching the plant surface. We only see a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum as visible light. In the visible range, light wavelengths in the red and blue range have the greatest effect on plant growth. Blue light encourages vegetative growth. Red light encourages flowering. Artificial light is often not as complete in the wavelengths required for proper plant growth and development as sunlight. Fluorescent light is high in wavelengths in the blue range. Incandescent light is high in the red or orange range, but can cause excessive heat in enclosed areas. Light duration is the amount of time a plant is exposed to sunlight or the lack of sunlight, and is designated as photoperiod. It is interesting that this light response is actually misnamed because it is the length of the time the plant is in the dark that is the controlling factor. Plants such as onions are short day plants because flowers are formed when the day length is shorter than a critical length, usually about 12 hours. Short day plants are usually spring and fall flowering, such as Vidalia onion, chrysanthemum, and poinsettia. Long day plants form flowers when the day length is longer than a critical length, usually about 12 hours. Long-day plants are usually summer flowering, such as rudbeckia, California poppy, beet, radish, spinach, and potato. Day-neutral plants form flowers regardless of day length. Some strawberry cultivars are day-neutral. In the final section of Unit 2, we will summarize the important effects temperature has on plant processes and examine several temperature-related growth and development phenomena in plants. Upon completion of this section, you should be able to list at least 6 plant processes affected by temperature and discuss how each process is affected by temperature, define thermoperiod and discuss the role of thermoperiod in plant growth and development, define forcing and give an example of a plant that is forced, define chilling requirement and give an example of a fruit that has a chilling requirement. Temperature affects all plant processes that take place during growth and development. Photosynthesis increases with temperature to a point. Respiration increases rapidly if temperature increases. Transpiration increases with temperature since temperature affects relative humidity. For example, leaf scorch on Japanese maple is an illustration of a problem caused by transpiration of water from leaves in excess of water uptake from the soil. In this case, increased transpiration is caused by a period of high temperature and low humidity. Flowering may be triggered by temperature. Low temperatures reduce energy use and increase sugar storage. After a period of low temperature, plants will break dormancy and the plant will resume active growth. Specific growth and development phenomena related to temperature include thermoperiod, forcing, and chilling requirement. Tomato is an example of a plant that has a high requirement for alternating day and night temperature in the environment. This daily temperature change requirement is referred to as thermoperiod requirement. In other words, plants that respond to and produce maximum growth when exposed to a day temperature that is about 10 to 15 degrees higher than the night temperature are said to have a thermoperiod requirement for growth. This adaptation allows the plants to photosynthesize or build up food, then respire or break down food during an optimum daytime temperature to curtail the rate of respiration during a cooler night. Temperatures higher than needed for growth cause increased respiration, sometimes above the rate of photosynthesis. When this occurs, the products of photosynthesis are used more rapidly than they are being produced. An important point to remember is that for growth to occur, photosynthesis must be greater than respiration. Therefore, a major goal in plant culture is to optimize conditions for efficient photosynthesis and minimize conditions that cause increases in respiration. A second plant growth phenomenon related to temperature is forcing. Forcing is the practice of using temperature in connection with day length to manipulate the flowering of plants. For example, chrysanthemums will flower for a longer period of time if daylight temperatures are 59 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees Celsius. The Christmas cactus forms flowers as a result of short days and low temperatures. Temperature alone also influences flowering. For example, daffodils and tulips are forced to flower by putting the bulbs in cold storage in October at 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. Cold temperature allows the bulbs to mature. The bulbs are then transferred to the greenhouse in midwinter where growth begins. Flowers are ready for cutting in 3 to 4 weeks. The final plant growth phenomenon related to temperature is chilling requirement. Chilling requirement refers to a certain number of days of low temperature needed by plants in order to grow and develop properly. Peaches are a good example of a fruit tree with a chilling requirement. Some peach cultivars require 700 to 1,000 hours below 45 degrees Fahrenheit or 7 degrees Celsius, but above 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius, before they break their rest period and begin growth. However, there have been peach cultivars developed that have a chilling requirement as little as 200 hours. The objective of this presentation has been to familiarize you with the basic principles needed to have an understanding of the important plant physiological processes that control plant growth and development, and how the environment affects those processes.